Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Mike Riccio, who's Chief Marketing Officer at Leonard Express, and Prasad Gollapalli, who is founder and CEO of Trucker Tools. And today we're going to talk about how digital platforms are driving a new era in transportation. Now, the pace of change and innovation in technology continues to accelerate, and it's technology is playing a greater role across all industries. So, how is technology transforming the transportation and logistics industry? How is real-time freight visibility delivering business value and, helping to lead some of this transformational change? And, how do you drive adoption and business value ultimately in this market? Well, those are some of the key questions that we're going to address in today's episode. And it's great to have Mike and Prasad on the program to share their insights and advice on this topic. So, Mike, Prasad, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you, Adrian. Glad to be here.
Same here, Adrian. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, Mike, we've had Prasad on, several times, but you're a first-time guest here on Talking Logistics. And, some people might be familiar with Leonard Express, some people may not. So before we dive into the subject here, why don't you tell us a little bit about Leonard Express, the types of services you offer and the industries that you serve and what your role and responsibilities are there at the company?
Sure. Leonard Express is a family-owned transportation provider. We're located here in upstate New York, which is actually Farmington, New York, which is just outside of Rochester. We operate an asset division and a non-asset division. On our asset division, we're operating around 450 trucks and around 800 trailers, both dry and refrigerated. On the non-asset side, we have multiple offices around the country. We're not really a small company, but we're not a large company. We're going to do around 230 to 240 million in revenue this year. It's split evenly between our asset division and the non-asset division. And it's a family-owned business. I'm part of the family that owns the business, and I'm the chief marketing officer for the company. And the sales strategy falls under me, and the marketing and branding is also my responsibility. Predominantly, we haul grocery and food-related products.
Great. Well, certainly great to have family-owned businesses. Having come from a family that had its own business, I know the value of family-owned businesses and the challenges and everything else, especially in a very competitive market here now in transportation and everything that's happening, in the industry. So let's get right to it, Mike. I mean, being in the front lines and being a family business, and it's a sizable, even though it's not, one of the big guys, you
Right.
still have, between the asset side and the non-asset side, I mean, you got a broad range of services there, as well as the type of industries that you offer. I mean, so from your perspective in the industry, I mean, are we in a new era of transportation, and if so, in what ways?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of hyperboles being thrown out there right now. Technology revolution, or the technology is coming at everybody, like in a fire hose, and everybody's trying to figure out which system has the right value, which doesn't provide value, what is just a new shiny toy. But really, I do feel technology has definitely changed the game. Not only the speed of which things happen, if you stop and think about it, the speed at which the market goes from 10 trucks to every load to 10 loads for every truck and back again is mind-boggling. And really, you need technology to try to keep up with that. And quite frankly, the amount of data that is out there for people to get to that they didn't have before. I mean, if you really think about it, it used to be an uninformed market, right? A broker had a relationship with a carrier on one side and with a shipper on the other side, and neither side really knew what the other side had going on. But in today's environment, it's really more of an informed market because you can grab data from all different sources, and a shipper can kind of figure things out of what's going on in the market rather quickly, and so can a carrier, and adjust accordingly. And everybody wants traceability, everybody wants visibility. Today, it's visibility is what used to be an add-on or an extra, really is now quite standard and required by most customers. And you need to have that technology to really to play in the marketplace. So for us, it's really just trying to figure out which technology is driving value and which really is just a shiny new toy that really isn't something we could use.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I think something you said kind of caught my attention. I mean, I think I guess to simplify and oversimplify perhaps, but it used to be, hey, can you get my load from point A to point B, or can you find me a load for my truck, right? And that's still obviously still the important piece of it at the core of it, but it's beyond that today, because a lot of what both the carriers want and the shippers want is visibility, and they want data, and they have access to data now. So what they're doing now from their partners such as yourself is not just to be a provider of capacity at affordable rates and so forth. They're looking to you as being providers of insights and data and analytics and so forth to help your customers drive better more successful operations, right?
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I think that all in our personal lives today, we're accustomed to pushing a button and having that product there. Sometimes in Amazon's case, drone drops it there in an hour, and everybody has those expectations in their personal. So they're also expecting it, in the business sense. And that data that's available for everybody to make better decisions and help shippers make better decisions and help carriers be more productive didn't used to be there, and now it's there. And you just have to be able to understand that and utilize that appropriately to survive in today's environment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, everybody talks about the Amazon effect, and I think, we've seen it in kind of the B2C space, but absolutely it's kind of being adopted here in the B2B, the business to business realm as well. Well, Prasad, going over to you now. I mean, we've talked a little bit about technology now, and Mike gave some great, he talked about, how do you separate, the shiny new toys from the things that are actually going to deliver value and address the needs of the market. I mean, how are digital platforms enabling, this new era in transportation as Mike just described it?
So, what Mike said is absolutely right. Everything is built on data today. Everybody, we're not talking about technology separate from data. So the underlying data is, I was at one of the conferences and somebody said, are we in a technology revolution or are we in a data revolution? The boundaries are kind of blurred a little bit, because, you take an example of, when you look at a 3PL and a shipper and a carrier relationship, they want to know when the load is being picked up, whether it's being picked up as scheduled, whether it's in transit. If so, is it going to make the appointment for the delivery on time or not? If there are exceptions, how soon can I know this? This is just one part of the supply chain. We deal with many more nuances like this, right? Just that alone relies on the fact that you want to know exactly where it is and what's the predictability that this load gets delivered on time. What are certain factors that could impact, like the weather, traffic, and others, right? So that data is the key. And, in many ways, what technology is doing is taking enormous amounts of data that's available out there, crunching it down to really what's important for us, and converting that into information. The information such as your load is going to be there on time, or we just realized that your load is not going to be on time. It's going to be delayed by 2 hours. So you're immediately telling the shipper about it, so the shipper could take necessary steps. It all comes down to that. In many ways, it might even trigger an alert to the shipper, so they're already thinking about contingency plans. So that part of it, that technology is not a one and done. So what technology is doing to the brokers and carriers in specific is allowing them to go through these nuances much faster and focus on what's more important than what's not important. So in many ways, these tools are filtering our data, kind of creating efficiencies at a personal level, to an organization level, and to a supply chain level.
I like that point about, kind of the lines blurring between, technology and data or information. And I think you're right. I mean, I think you said the key word here is, is efficiency. And I think because the speed of change is continues to accelerate, and the competitive landscape continues to get more, aggressive, you just can't throw bodies at the problem anymore, if you will. So the kind of key thing is how do you meet these ever-changing, more stringent customer requirements and expectations, but do so in a profitable way, so you can scale and grow your operations, right, in a profitable way. And I think that's where this data and this information, to your point, is helping all the parties involved, because that's at the end of the day what they're trying to do, right? It's they're trying to meet new customer expectations. They're trying to grow and scale, but do so in a profitable way. So, Mike, let's go back to you, and can you share a little bit with us about your journey and experience in providing real-time freight visibility? I mean, what was the value proposition for Leonard Express, and how did you roll it out and get drivers to use it and so forth?
Yeah, well, it's been a little bit of an interesting journey, as I'm sure everybody that's gone through this has experienced. Right? Everybody's got their own unique nuances to their network and to their company, but I would think we've all had somewhat similar processes or similar experiences. For us, we were using a technology partner to handle the visibility and traceability for us. And quite honestly, Adrian, we really were concerned about their long-term viability and kind of their long-term vision as to how this was going to be rolled out and mapped out. And so we were out there in the market looking for other vendors to supply that for us. That's when we ran into Prasad and his team. And for us, rolling that out was, first we had to start really internally. Kind of how, as you indicated right before, it was like, help me get this truck matched up with this load, or help me find a load for this, help me find a carrier for this load. I mean, we still have those guys and gals that need to do the blocking and tackling to get the freight moved and covered. But what's changed is we need to have a better understanding on the floor level, at that level, of what our customers' expectations are. And that just getting the load covered is no longer just good enough. You've got to get it covered. Then you've got to figure out, keep the customer updated as to where it is at all times, whether it be once an hour, once every 2 hours, or whatever their intervals are. And so the first step that we did was really educate internally our employees, especially longtime employees, that things were changing, customers' demands were changing, and expectations were changing. And that kind of took a while, right? You got some old school people that have been used to doing things a certain way, and well, that's now changed on them. So, part of it was, number one, getting people internally prepared and educated as to what was going on. And really for us, the value proposition was to be able to confirm that data and confirm that truck really was where it was supposed to be. Before, when a customer, you would call a dispatcher and say, I need a track and trace on truck number 123. It's under a load for shipper XYZ, and that dispatcher would tell you what that was, but maybe that's really where that truck was. Maybe that's really not where that was. I mean, you were basically relying on, them telling you the truth in your relationship with them. Now you can check that out. So now you can, right on a map, can confirm, yep, that truck is really where we think it is and where it's supposed to be. So for us, that was the value proposition, really confirming the accuracy of the information of where the equipment was.
Yeah, that's great. I think I love the part about kind of starting internally with the education process, right? Because, whether it's this type of technology or any kind of technology, a lot of times what you hear from companies that have had successes is that it really begins with that education process and buy-in, because in the cases where it doesn't work out, it's where it's where those change management hurdles have not, companies have not been able to overcome those change management hurdles. So I think that's that's pretty insightful that it kind of gets started with that internal piece. Now in terms of from the driver standpoint, I mean, did you start out with just a handful of drivers and carriers to kind of test this out at first, just kind of get that buy-in, or how did you roll it out?
Well, really, we rolled it out. What we did before rolling it out was really work with Prasad and his team is to see how many of our current carriers were already utilizing that specific tool. And out of our top 20 carriers, 92% were already using the tool. So for us, that top 20 handles quite a bit of our freight. So we decided to roll it straight on out. And, right, wrong, or indifferent, what we did is we just rolled it out. put it on the rate confirmations, had conversations with our carriers, whether it be if it's a single truck operator with with the driver himself, or with some of our larger fleets that we work with, the dispatchers and managers of those fleets, and really just good old fashioned communication, putting it on the rate confirmations, having phone conversations, indicating that this is where the market was going, and in order to move this load, this is what's required. We had a little concerns about, people having to get some carriers to download another app, but that really didn't turn out to be as big of a deal as we thought it would be. And really sometimes now that we've had it for a while and we're a little bit more mature in the process, it's on our, we're telling our drivers and carriers, we're not going to give you the load information, pardon me, until you download that app and give us your location and accept the frequency from us so that we can track and trace the load.
Right. Well, it sounds like already, a good percentage of the, carriers you're working with already were familiar with the trucker tools, solution. So obviously that helped, speed up the buy-in, if you will, because they're already familiar with it. So Prasad, going back to you, I mean, where does, we talked a lot about the technology, about the data, right? We've been talking a lot about the data and being able to then, transform that into actionable, information. But where does this real-time freight visibility data, come from? I mean, are there multiple ways to, to capture this data? What are some of the important, considerations or pros and cons around different approaches?
Sure. So when you look at real-time freight visibility, it typically falls into two categories, right? Two sides rather, not categories. The one side is the actual data of where the truck is or where the cell phone is, which is tied to the truck, right? At any given point, that is that location information. Generating that location information, we call this as visibility generation, right? Or data generation. The other side is just aggregating that into easy to use forms and pushing it back into a broker's TMS or a shipper's TMS or whoever needs to get that, so that they're not looking at one load at a time, but all of their loads are aggregated. That's that aggregation part. Between these two, the generation part is the key. Otherwise, we are building a house without any foundation, literally. I mean, you can aggregate data as much as you want, but if that underlying data is not there, then, I mean, it's got no value, right? So, and when you go into the generation of the data, there are only a few ways we can get that. One is, let's say, through an app or, from the cell phone directly. Back, a couple of years back, a lot of people were able to do the cell phone triangulation so that, they could get that location, but that's not there anymore. So it all comes down to getting that GPS location from the phone. And there are two ways that happens. One is you have an app that only does tracking. Flat out, you're telling the driver, all I'm going to do is track you. Where we have seen a lot of resistance with that approach. The other one is what Trucker Tools has taken is put an app that has a lot of value to the driver. And part of that is visibility. So they understand why visibility is there, but it's not fully, blocking them. That's the second approach. A third approach is ELDs. A lot of people might say, well, there is an ELD device in the truck. Why can't we pull that information? There are some hurdles in that. We could go into details of how the ELD thing is. And then the fourth approach is plain old check calls. I mean, calling the driver and saying where you are, right? Like Mike said earlier, we'll have to depend on the driver telling us everything right. And, it doesn't matter, right? When the truck is moving along the road and it's expected to deliver on time, you don't expect the driver to tell you a lie. It's usually when there is a delay is when there is a possibility that you may not get the right information. Actually, that is when you want to know the right information more than the other side. So plain old check calls have been the problem. So we have to take that off the table. It comes down to using the driver's cell phone, through an app that's not resisted by the drivers or ELDs. And when you look at the ELDs themselves alone, what we have found out is On the surface, this whole thought of getting the drivers to share their ELD location was good because everybody has a ELD device in the truck. However, a lot of uncertainty goes with it. The more we dig in, the more we found out that, especially the small carriers or mid-sized carriers, owner-operators, they work with multiple brokers. So they always worry about, if I share my data with you, what other things are you seeing first? Two, who are the people you're sharing this with? Are you sharing this with an insurance company? And frankly, they have to jump through a bunch of hoops, like to give permission to share their ELD data with all confidentialities around it, right? And when they go through a bunch of hoops to give you permission, the back of their mind, what they're thinking is, if I don't like to work with you and I need to pull the plug, I would have to jump through a bunch of hoops. And most likely, I may not be able to fully pull it out. You still know where I am. That uncertainty, that lack of transparency there, or that gray area, causes a lot of hard work for them. They typically take anywhere up to, from 3 months to up to 6 months to give permission. But if they're working closely with a broker, they probably share more. So these are, the pros and cons of various things that we have seen. And it frankly comes down to when people like Mike have a carrier that they just onboarded and they want to put a load on that. You can't just wait at that point. Onboarding is an important thing. Every day, as these carriers come and go in the system, brokers are onboarding new carriers, and they like to bring that carrier on board on a system that's consistent. So
yeah, no, that's a great overview. And I think, going back to the check calls, I mean, in addition to, perhaps some question marks around the validity of some of the information being transmitted back, it's just the labor and the time to kind of, pick up the phone and
Right.
call in and call out, and the number of people. And like we talked about before, if your goal is to drive better efficiency to be able to scale and grow profitably, doing check-in calls are not part of that equation anymore, right? I mean, that's where, leveraging some of the other technology approaches, whether it's, through ELDs or, phone apps and so forth, is probably the, it's the direction I think the industry is moving in. So Mike, going back to you, I mean, as you were evaluating, the different solutions and approaches you wanted to take, I think you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but maybe just to kind of underscore some points. I mean, what were some of the key capabilities you were looking for, and what factors or attributes ultimately led you to select Trucker Tools as your technology partner, and what are some of the benefits to date?
Yeah, really, we are big on culture. We are big on, and I know it sounds corny. Certainly, price matters. I'm not to say it does not; would be disingenuous. But for us, it's really about sitting down with someone taking the time to really understand how our network works, because as everybody's network is unique to themselves, and Prasad and his team took the time to do that. And, we had some apprehensions. Like I said, on one hand, we were really not real comfortable with our current provider and the long-term viability of some of their services. But on the other hand, we had some concerns about downloading the app, and, that's one more app, and how are you going to get these drivers to do that and accept that, kind of some of the things that Prasad touched upon about the level of trust, especially when you're dealing with maybe a spot load basis, or you're dealing with a brand new carrier that you don't have a relationship yet, and you just haven't had the time to develop the relationship and build that trust. But really, for us, the value really was that smart capacity tool. The first was them taking the time to understand our business and work with us, and we had some concerns because they're at that time excuse me, their product did not integrate with our TMS system. And Prasad worked with us to try to do a workaround around the TMS system while we were working on the integration. And their customer service was fantastic. Every time we asked for something or asked a question, they were not only quick to respond, but worked with us while we were trying to get through the integration with our current TMS system. Because we found that our TMS system at that point in time wasn't the most flexible. And Prasad and his team had to do a few things to really get us up and running efficiently. But the smart capacity tool, as soon as we plug that in, carriers were calling us on loads that we didn't even have posted. right? Carriers that were in our system are now seeing available loads, and it really improved productivity. And it also validated internally with our operations people. Some of those people, those old timers that might have been a little skeptical, we're now seeing some of the fruits of the labor, and you didn't have to work as hard. Kind of like you were talking about with the validity and the labor involved in check calling. It also improved some of our efficiencies and productivity of booking and covering our load. And we no longer had to send out email blasts of what available loads we had. We stopped doing that. So really for us, the two things was the culture of Prasad's team and their willingness to work with us in some of our challenges with initially with our TMS and the smart capacity tool and the value that drove.
Great points, especially about the culture piece. And I know that we've talked about it now here and Talking Logistics now for the past couple of years. We're hearing more and more testimonials like yours in terms of the reasons people pick a technology company as their partner, and it's because of that partnership approach. It goes beyond the features and functions, but it's really looking for alignment in culture and the ability to really work hand in hand in achieving not only the near-term goals but the long-term goals of the company as well. So I think I'm glad to see that the industry is finally moving in that direction where technology companies are being viewed as partners, because ultimately it's a win-win for both parties, right? So it becomes a much tighter, beneficial relationship for both. And I think the part about smart capacity is great, because I mean that's something there's a lot of buzz and excitement around that type of technology today, and certainly I think the fact that it's bearing fruit for companies such as yours is great great to hear. So Prasad, going back to you, I mean when it comes to obviously you've worked with a lot of different companies as you deploy the solution, and like Mike mentioned, every company is a little bit different in terms of their approach and what works and what doesn't work, or whatever. But when it comes to deploying real-time freight visibility, or even something like smart capacity, the other solutions that you have, I mean what factors are the most important to ensure a successful deployment?
So I think most of the times, Mike said a couple of things that are very true. He said, getting people to change in his company, it has to come from top down, and it needs to happen in waves, not just in one shot, one and done. So for any vendor, so from a vendor's viewpoint, when we work with companies like Leonard Express with Mike's team, the way we look at this is we try to set expectations that this is not a one and done. This is not magic dust that we're just sprinkling and everything just turns beautiful one day, right? It's a constant process, and no two customers are same. Like this is an important thing, like Mike said, right? I mean the culture is important, understanding, because the way a broker moves freight, one broker moves freight from another broker, they're going to be different, and the attributes that they look at is going to be different. Just so even on the definition of what constitutes a successful track, we have multiple definitions that the brokers ask for. Not so much on the definition of it, but the attributes that they look for. One might look for an update every hour. One might look for an update every 15 minutes. One might look for an update every 4 hours. Just near the exception, right? All that constitutes. So for a vendor to be successful in this, the first thing they have to do is understand their customer very well and be part of the process. Not tell the broker that or the customer that getting high compliance is your responsibility. It's never that, right? Work with what works with their carriers. Make the carriers part of the solution, right? And also look for, when we got Leonard Express on board, we didn't achieve that high level of visibility on day one that we got with them. So we started off, and month over month, our goal is to see an improvement in that. And lay it down as, hey, in phase one, we're starting with visibility. Our goal is to also open up that matching side, the digital freight matching side. So we did work with them, because these timelines will not be all aligned. You got to get the ball rolling and add more layers to it. Today we have Book It now. It's a completely automated freight matching to put it over the top. and it would be another rollout, and we're looking at ways to improve that with customers. So work with them and share with them. A lot of technology players have a fear that if I share my roadmap with my vendor, they might poke holes in it. That's exactly the reason why you want to share it, because you want a customer to tell you that you're on the wrong track before you actually go and build. The traditional approach of people take a year to build something or 2 years only to find out that nobody likes that. Those days are gone. I mean, you can't do that. So you make your customers a stakeholder in your roadmap is very important. So we don't, every call that we do, we ask our customers, what you like about us, what you don't like about us. Where can we improve? They'll say, hey, these are the areas in that product that we want to see it improve. So these are important for all of it. Now, all of this is between the vendor and the broker. The key part is people ignore the carrier because they don't typically sit at the table and have these conversations. And moreover, they're also not the paying customer. We try to ignore them. They are key to this. So what are you doing? Customers like Mike ask us this question. What are you doing as a vendor to attract carriers? What kind of a value you're providing to these carriers? I think these are very important questions to discuss upfront. If you're in the market, ask your vendor, what are they doing to please carriers? What kind of an experience they're giving to them? And, frankly, check with your carriers and ask them. I mean, we had customers like, Mike said, they checked the top 20 and said how many of them are already on trucker tools. We had some carriers or brokers that called their carriers and said, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer trucker tools or their own app? And apparently, they said a neutral app like us. So that feedback is important.
Yeah, and I think that those are all great points, and particularly bringing in the carrier as part of the conversation or as part of the because at the end of the day they're a critical part of the solution, right? I mean, they're the ones who ultimately are going to be using the application in this case and providing that data and information, and then the other piece, making the technology partner be part of be part of the solution in terms of driving compliance, and so forth. Well, great points, Prasad. We're running a little bit short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question here. And Mike, I'll ask you first, and then Prasad, you can add your perspective as well. So, I mean, what is the biggest lesson learned from your journey, Mike, that you would give to other companies that are just maybe getting started on this journey?
I think the biggest lesson learned really would be to be patient. Prasad was talking about it earlier about rolling it out in waves. And I think you're all excited. You've got this new tool. It's got a lot of bells and whistles. It's got a lot of exciting things that it can do. And, we just have to be patient and take it a step at a time. It takes time to develop relationships. As you indicated earlier, Adrian, change sometimes can be difficult. Driving change can be difficult. And you just need to be patient and consistent to move forward and a step at a time and keep the process moving forward. In addition, really, as I touched on earlier, and I know it sounds a little corny, but culture. And, if you're aligned with the right, you're going to have challenges in any relationship. And it's just a lot easier to work through those challenges if you and your vendor are aligned and have a similar outlook and a similar culture. Great
advice. Prasad, any final thoughts?
Mike said everything, very good in terms of change being incremental. But I would say this, from a vendor point, look for vendors that have fast-paced culture. So we've got to try different things and constantly push the envelope. I mean, you can't rest, right? That should be a collaboration. But as a vendor, you want to spearhead that conversation with your customer and make the customer part of it. That collaboration is the only way to solve a problem. And if you don't collaborate with your customers early enough, you're going to deviate from the path too far, and getting back on track is always going to be difficult. So at every step, Sometimes you will hear things that you may not like, but make them part of the conversation. And instead of looking at technologies as visibility or digital freight matching, and these terms are really floating high up in the head. The way we will look at this is it's a cost of covering a load. What is the variable cost of covering a load for a broker or a 3PL or a carrier? What can we do to bring that cost to almost zero, if not zero, right? It's a variable cost. You have other fixed costs, but if we could bring it down through whether better visibility or complete automation of booking a load, right? The digital freight matching, where we call it Book It Now. But these terms will stay and go, but the overall arching goal is how do you reduce that cost of covering a load? Because that has so much resonance in supply chain that it goes to the carrier, it goes to the broker, it goes to the shipper, and everyone wins. And the last thing that I would add to that is when you look at technology, don't look at technology to bypass the carrier or the driver. That is probably one of the biggest mistakes we do. We don't include carrier or driver in that technology. We try to go around them. And by doing that, you're actually alienating yourself from that carrier or the driver. They'll figure out that you're trying to do it without their knowledge, or you're trying to avoid them. It's so much better to have the carrier as the center of the conversation and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So, things like when you're talking to a carrier, ask them what technologies will help them that they're already using, and ask yourselves, can I adapt to what my carriers are already using? Then you're showing actions in when you say, I'm committed to my carriers. That's a good commitment. You're taking a step forward and say, let me adapt to a technology that you are using, if it makes sense in the first place, right? By keeping that carrier part of the conversation, in the long haul, I know the capacity is a little softer today, but it's going to pick up very soon. And that happens, these carriers remember that you made some certain things to make them part of your ecosystem, and that goes a long way. So that's pretty much.
Yeah, no, a lot of great points, from both of you. And again, like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we can probably spend, a whole day or more, talking through this whole topic and everything that's happening in the industry. But you both provide some great insights and advice relative to this topic. So, Mike, Prasad, again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate the invite.
Thanks. Thank you both for the time.
So I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Trucker Tools website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Mike, or Prasad, you can post it there. And I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.